Hi, Miyoshi. It's a pleasure being here.
Thank you so much for being willing to help talk about a topic of discussion that people need to know about and
Sure.
talk about because it's very prevalent in our neighborhoods.
Absolutely. And so, what is domestic violence?
Domestic violence is defined as abuse or relationship abuse, and it's a pattern of behaviors used by one or more partner to maintain power and control over another person in an intimate relationship. Domestic violence not only happens within the home, domestic violence can be an outpour of what's going on in your home, and it can pour into the community. I'll give you an example. If a family member is fighting on the inside of the house,
Yes.
and that fighting goes on to the outside of the house, then the community is aware and it affects those around them.
Now, when you say domestic violence, does it necessarily have to be physical violence?
No, it doesn't. Domestic violence it has different forms of abuse.
Okay.
It could be in the form of, you know, it could be in the form of elderly abuse. We want no more elderly abuse.
That's true.
Domestic violence also could be in the form of child abuse, where the children are either physically or mentally abused. There are different types of abuses. One does not have to just be physical, which would be hitting or making a person physically suffer in any form. But the spiritual, emotional abuse to another human being can be crippling. Even if you isolate them, isolating people is a form of abuse, keeping them from their family.
Sure.
One of the things that abusers do, they want to have power and control. Some of the things that they do, they use intimidation, which is making people afraid. One of the other things they do is using emotional abuse by putting people down.
Yeah,
You know, siblings can be abusive to each other.
absolutely.
Using isolation. A lot of senior citizens, I mean, you can isolate them and by not coming over to visit.
And that's abuse.
You can teach minimizing and blaming. You know, it's kind of like I remember back in the day when people didn't have a lot of food, and someone would get the last. I'll just say, for instance, the last piece of fried chicken, and that child that took the last piece might be beat.
Okay, so we're talking about not only physical abuse, we're talking about mental abuse.
Blaming,
Yeah,
blaming. How about using children?
yeah.
Husbands and wives having disputes, and then you making her feel guilty about the children, whether it's keeping the children away from that custodial parent.
Right.
In these days and times, there's a lot of separation and divorce, and people using children as weapons against one another.
And that's mental abuse with the child.
Yes, it
You know,
is.
and that child can grow up to do the same. He or she can mirror that parent.
Yes, the abuser.
Exactly.
So here's another one. It says using male privilege, treating her like she's a servant, making all the decisions where she makes none, acting like he's the master instead of a equal partner, being the one to define the men and the women's role.
Well, is that the purpose of the abuser, to feel like he or she are in control of that person?
I think so. I believe that when men dominate because they're men, it's a form of manipulation,
Sure.
and it's not a good thing for other males to see.
Well, what are the statistics on that?
Well, some of the statistics on abuse is that one in four females will be abused in the United States. It says on the average, 24 people per minute are victims of rape, physical violence, or stalking of an intimate partner in the United States. More than 1 million women and men over a course of a year will suffer some form of abuse. And it states also that nearly 3 in 10 women and 1 in 10 men will experience rape. It says also that nearly 15% of women and 4% of men have been injured as a result of partner violence. And that partner violence includes rape, physical violence, stalking of another partner in a lifetime. Now, you know what? How often do people have to suffer violence, stalking? It's all like something that's just common.
Well, you think that is more, is happening more because of people are scared to say anything? The victim is scared to say anything?
Yes, I do believe. I believe that in the process of our day-to-day, that using in the process of our day-to-day, I think that people are not aware of their surroundings sometimes, and that doing this, the abuser himself, it's usually one-sided. It's usually one-sided.
Well, why do you think it's so prevalent? I mean, is it maybe the income, that the stress from not having the right income or taking care of the family, that can cause like the controller to be so upset that it take it out on their families?
I think sometimes that, now in my opinion, I think sometimes the lack of communication and the lack of preparation. Sometimes people are not aware that the person that they're with has abusive tendencies.
Okay, let me tell you, a long time ago, a friend told me, there's always signs. There is always a sign. It's like if you meet somebody, everything is nice, but this person gets just a tiny bit aggressive, but in a playful way, it's not really, it's not a good thing. That is one sign. When a person gets upset real quick, that's a sign that, hey, this person may be a little aggressive, maybe I should back off. You got to think, you got to look at these signs. A lot of people don't look at them. A lot of people ignore them, and that's a problem.
Well, what would be a typical sign of an abuser, do you think?
Well, I think sometimes if, say maybe you're out somewhere, and you're talking to this person, having a good time, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, this reaction comes, and it's a negative reaction, but it's out of the blue. That's a sign that maybe, hey, something's not right. Or you're joking, you're playing, but this person starts pushing you and pushing you a little bit too much.
Or hard.
Hard. That's a sign. I mean, this person told me, a friend told me a long time ago, and I believe them. There are signs, but whether we choose to pay attention to them or ignore them, that's the problem. But there are always signs, and I believe that.
I think that one of the things that we should learn to tune into is not only the signs, but the fact that we as onlookers can be helpful.
Exactly. Because some people are afraid to say anything. If I see somebody like a friend being abused, would I say anything? Yeah, I would like to think I would. If I see somebody with a bruise on their face, a woman with a bruise on her face, or bleeding somewhere, yeah, I would want to say, are you okay? Is everything okay at home? A lot of people are scared to say that because they feel like they're intruding,
Have you ever seen that program called What Would You Do?
Yes.
Okay, and
exactly.
On that program, What Would You Do, they often give scenarios.
They do.
About things that are going on immediately around them, and they show people like in the restaurant
Right.
and different things. Well, you ever notice the ones when they are in violation of children, that it's very difficult for people to actually
Yeah.
come in and help that child? But like the new thing is new to us because we didn't come up with the LBG community being so overtly. So, but people are coming to their rescue for the transgenders and for the
Sure.
the new group of LBGT. And I was just wondering, what do you think in regards to being advocates for the new group of people?
Well, this is my thing. You don't want to see anybody abused. I don't care
That's
if
right.
it's a woman, it's a man, it's a child, it's somebody with a totally different gender.
Yes.
You just don't want to see anybody abused. I don't care what their lifestyle is.
And it has,
I don't want to see anybody abused. And I like to think that if I see somebody who I think is being abused, I like to think that I would say something.
but a lot of people have faiths or belief systems that, like I'll just use their belief is that women should not talk in public or that homosexuality is wrong. And so they live in these houses
Yeah.
behind closed doors. They are being abused. So when they come outside their door, they have the same timidity and don't want to share the
Yeah.
fact that I get abused when I go
Well,
home.
they're embarrassed, probably.
Think of the children that leave their homes and go to high school or go to school and they are suffering. It doesn't necessarily have to be sexual abuse.
No.
It could just be ridicule. Children have to go home and parents might be doing drugs and what goes on in the home stays in the home is generally a rule.
Yeah.
So as a teacher or as an adult, when do you come in your opinion, when should you step in to bring help to that child?
If I see that something is seriously wrong, if this child is not reacting like he should with the rest of the children, with her, if I notice there's signs like injuries on the child or, the child is coming in crying all the time or, it's just not looking kept, I'm going to address it. And I think any teacher now should address it.
There is things set up, there are systems set up to assist people that they're not aware of. If you go to the hospital, they have a system of asking questions, whether you're depressed, because they see certain signs and symptoms. If you're elderly with bruising, they can ask you questions. If you're standing around sad, they ask you personal questions about what's going on in the home. What do you think about those kind of things being in place? Would that bother you if you were asked personal questions?
No, because, when you go to the doctor's office now, they ask you a lot of different questions, but one of them is, do you feel safe at home? And I think that is a valid question because a lot of people will answer that because they don't know this person.
Right.
And they say, well, I can tell this person because they don't know me.
Right.
I can pour my heart out to this person because they don't know me. So I think, when they ask that question, it's a good question to ask.
I think so too. Let me ask you this. One of the things that I think that we as women, should find ourselves, should we find ourselves in an abusive situation, do we recognize signs that other women might not see?
You know what?
Can you see, is somebody said look in their eyes. If they don't say anything, just look in their eyes, you can see the pain.
Yeah, you can definitely see the pain. Years ago, I probably would say, I don't know, I couldn't tell. But now people are being a little more educated with this.
Yes.
And I think there's still some education that's needed with families and, individuals who don't know how to get out of a situation, who have no clue. They have no clue at all. Some people are just so like, I don't know, they're just so sheltered.
Well, let me read you a couple signs that they mentioned in my research. It says, you may be experiencing physical abuse if your partner has done any of these things, like pulling your hair, punching, slapping, kicking, biting, choking you. Those are obvious. But what about forbidding you to eat and to sleep? That's physical. Hurting you with a weapon. Preventing you from calling the police and seeking medical attention. Harming your children.
That's, yeah.
Abandoning you in familiar places, just dropping you off and telling you to figure out how you're going to get back. Driving recklessly or dangerously when you're in a car, threatening your life. And forcing you to use drugs and alcohol.
Wow.
These things do occur. And what do you think a person should do that's listening that has had either of these things happen to them?
I think they ought to seek help.
See, I think
Because if you ever gone through anything like that, you need some help.
and leave.
You have to leave, but it's like
Make yourself safe.
you
first.
sometimes they need help too.
Help
They
to
need an
leave.
outside source to help. And a lot of times, if they're just given a number, if they're given a number to call, they can go somewhere and call that number. Sometimes that's all they need. Some people don't know where to go.
That's very true.
You know, so if they're given a number, a phone number, or, you know, or just going over somebody else's house that this person doesn't know where they are,
Right.
you know, you can't really call. I think they're scared to call the police because they know that person's going to get right out and the same thing is going to repeat itself.
Well, here's something else. I think that if it were me in a situation, the first thing I do was pull myself out of the situation so that I could think a little bit more clearly without being a nervous
But
wreck.
some people don't have that mindset to do that. What do you think?
I agree. I agree. But fear is a tactic. And I heard someone tell me back in the day, she said, I was too afraid to leave. I was afraid that he'd hurt my children. I was afraid that he had beat me so many times that I was afraid of the next beating. And to me, the first hit is the reason to leave, not the second. Don't wait on it.
Exactly.
Because 9 times out of 10, if you got the first, a second is around
Exactly,
the corner.
because they're going to get away with it one time, for
Yes,
sure, because it's going to
yes,
happen.
yes.
But the thing is, if it happened that one time, that's when you leave. That's exactly when you leave.
Well, I was also looking at a thing that says 5 things that we as a culture can do to prevent domestic violence. And one of the things I think we need to do is bring it to the attention of legislature. Another thing they say is to do preventive programs that actually work.
Yeah, that's what I think. Programs would definitely help.
It said also make penalties for domestic violence consistent and firm. Not just certain sect of people get domestic violence, not just the poor get beat up on,
No, not at all.
but the rich and wealthy,
Yes, they
anybody is subjected to becoming abused. It's not just women only, it's not a women only crime.
Yeah. Do you know any stories of anybody, being abused?
Well, I tell you, personally, I remember coming up in our neighborhood, and there was a husband and a wife, and it seemed like he went home drunk every weekend. And the reason why we knew, because they would start the fight inside, and the fight would roll into the street to
Wow.
where the police would have to come and intervene, both of them fighting. And the thing I thought about that, and how when you're a kid, you can't say anything. Remember back then when we came up, kids didn't have a voice.
No, not at all.
But they had children that would watch them fight. I think they had 7 kids.
Wow.
So all I know is certain things can become behaviors that'll be passed along.
Mm-hmm.
And domestic violence is one of those things. That modeled in front of your children, they might think that that's how people should behave and will behave
And then they carry that
over.
on when they become adults.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a good thing. And it's just like everything is like a trickle of, we have no idea how much power we have when it comes to controlling our kids.
Yes.
And they see us and they want to be like us, whether it's good or bad.
Yes.
You know, and that's the bad part about domestic violence when you have children around.
The other thing too, I remember kids saying one time to me, I looked up to you and their dad as being role models because they didn't have a mom and a dad. They only had one or the other parent. And I think that when it's just like in the grocery store when you see young women cussing at their babies.
Oh yeah, I can't stand to hear
And
that.
you just wonder to yourself what actually is going on inside the house,
Right.
that you can bring this type of conversation into the public. And then it's violent to us that don't do it. Well, how do we help that girl?
Right.
How do we tell her not to say those big, ugly, powerful words to 1 and 2 year old babies?
Yeah, you know, one time I was coming out the store, and this woman was talking to her daughter, and I think the daughter had to be like around 9 or 10. She talked to this little girl like she was nothing. She told her how ugly she was. I'm like, I couldn't believe I was hearing this. And then she got so angry at the girl, she just told her to leave. I'm like, where is she going? I mean, this we were in a parking lot. So I think it was my daughter and I. We got ready to walk toward her, but she went back with the mother. So it's like, what do you do with situations like this?
Well,
You know, it's
Children are always gonna. I don't care if the mom or the dad beat them half to death. They still love their
that's the
parents.
problem.
And the same with
I mean,
same
you
with,
know, they're
same
supposed to
with
love their
people
parents, but
being in
it's-
love because
Yeah.
we're all taught to forgive. So if that abuser, she still loves him, guess where she's gonna go? She's gonna forgive him and go back and suffer more at the hands of this person.
Because that person's gonna go back and say how much I love you. You know, I didn't mean it, and
So
that
we
type
know
of
that
thing.
that's an emotional thing. Our thing is to please just stop domestic violence.
Yeah,
Stop domestic violence.
that's true.
One of the things too they would talk about is increased funding for the programs, change ways family court deals with
Right.
domestic violence because some of these killings are senseless. I just heard of a case in Cincinnati where the girl broke up with her guy. He came and shot and killed her in front of the kids. I mean, the gun violence is terrible. I mean, this dealing with your anger, stress is huge.
It is.
I remember back when we were kids that a young lady went home from school and she found her mom and her ex-boyfriend both killed, you know. And I'm just saying these things that affected the children
Yeah.
for the rest of their lives.
Right.
And I'm just saying, we need help. It says one of the other ways that we can assist in preventing domestic violence is empowering people economically and even psychologically to be independent of other people, to love yourself enough.
Exactly.
You got to love yourself enough to take care of yourself.
So the abuser actually needs help.
The abuser needs help.
Yeah.
Domestic violence, to me, is something that can be stopped because it's just based on
I think so
choices.
too.
I
It is
don't
all
think-
it's all based on choices. You know, it's sometimes I guess, you know, the abuser just cannot control that anger.
Right.
You know, so there's got to be some type of program, some type of anger management program that these abusers can get into, you know, to stop all this violence.
Well, you know what? A lot of times they think it's a female problem, but actually it isn't just a
Yeah.
female problem.
Right, it's not.
I mean, it said power and control. Think about the young ladies that are sending good guys to prison.
Yeah.
not paying child support, had another girlfriend on the side.
Right.
I mean, these things right here are not necessarily the worst things in the world, but counseling could assist,
That's
as
true.
opposed to breaking windows and beating one another up.
Right.
There has to be better solutions than violence.
You know, I think, and that's where, like you said, people have to get involved. Just like the medical community, they're getting involved by asking the questions, do you feel safe at home? I think that is the best thing they could have done.
April, our program is about to come to a conclusion, but I hope we're on the same page about domestic violence.
We are,
I
definitely.
think that if we, as a part of the community, can be engaged, let me share with you some of the places that we can go in Cleveland. In Cleveland, we have a 800 number, I'm sorry, there's an 800 number, 24 hours, and it's the 24-hour hotline for abuse. It's 1-800-799-7233. And in Cleveland, we had a domestic violence and child advocacy center. And the number there is 216-391-HELP or 229-2420. Ladies and gentlemen, you also have your pastor, you have the police, you have your neighbor, you have family relatives, close friends.
Exactly.
Do not allow yourselves to be in a position of danger.
And just take advantage of, if you're listening and you're being abused, please take advantage of these phone numbers that were just given to you. Believe me, they will help you. They can find help for you.
You can call 911 or 211 and tell them where you are. You just leave the situation and tell them what's going on. It's anonymous phone calls. We can stop domestic violence, but the first person you need to save is yourself.
Right.
Get out of that situation, and neighbors, let them in. Don't be afraid to help.
Right.
And again, I want to say thank you for tuning in to People Talk 2. That's what we're all about. Community helping one another. And we hope to see you again next week. God bless,
God bless
you
you.
all. Bye-bye. Thanks again, April, for
You're welcome.
being
It's
with
a
me
pleasure.
today. Thank you so much.